Okay, good. I say Mona. I've got my computer on down here and I can see a few people, so I'll depend on you to let me know if I fade out or anything. If you want to go ahead and get started, turn over to Psalm 37. I want to look at one particular verse there in Psalm 37. Remember a Bible study I went to some 37, 38 years ago. This verse was brought up in that Bible study, and we were told that it was a way of getting our desires met. Psalm 37, verse 4, if you're there, says, "Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart." And in that Bible study, the man said that if we truly delight in God, he related it to a romantic love, and said if we really love God, if we do everything that we would do to God that we would to a date or a prospective mate, treat them that way, try to impress them, do what they want done, then we would get the desires of our heart. This verse has been used by a lot of the people who preach the health and wealth gospel. And they say this is one of the promises that God wants to bless you and wants to give you whatever you want. If you want a new Mercedes, all you have to do is love God with all your heart and you're going to get that new Mercedes. If you love God with all your heart and you want a big mansion to live in, you'll get that mansion. You'll get all these because you love God with all your heart and because you send an offering into us. Oh, no, that's what they say. But is that what Psalm 37:4, is that what it means? Today I'd like to ask a question and answer the question, is Psalm 34 the key to getting what you want from God? Now, for a little context, and we're warned always, don't take just one verse, look around it for the context, look for the context of the chapter, the book, the whole Bible. Just look at the context of Psalm 37. Let's back up to verse 1 and read it. Verse 1 says, "Do not fret because of evildoers, nor be envious of the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb." The theme that we're going to see here in this chapter is don't fret, don't worry. Here it says don't worry about the workers of iniquity. Down in verse 7, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass." And in verse 8 it says, "Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret, it only causes harm." 3 times there we're told, don't fret. And I thought, that word's repeated a lot, so I wanted to look up and see what it meant. So I went to Webster's, and it really interested me, the first definition Webster gave of don't fret or fret means to eat or gnaw into something. And when I see people fretting over something, it's something that they've thought about a lot and they continue to go over in their mind. They just keep eating at it. And the second definition I saw there in Webster's was agitate. And the more we read this stuff or see what we're eating at and gnawing on, it makes us become agitated. And then the third definition there in Webster's was to become vexed or worried. So we eat at it, we continue to go over it in our mind and think about something, and then we become agitated about it, and then we start worrying about it. And the context of Psalm 37 is don't fret. Don't, because as it says there in verse 8, it only causes harm. So he tells us don't fret, and then in verse 4 he says delight yourself also in the Lord. That's what we should spend our time on. That's what we need to focus on, is God and his law, his love for us, his calling, all those things. And this really hit home to me because the last few weeks I've noticed so many people have gotten discouraged, are not necessarily discouraged, but angry with things going on in the world. And they think about the things that are going on, especially the evil that's going on, and it seems like the evil is winning out, and they become angry or whatever. And it's real easy to do if that's what we focus on, if that's what we keep gnawing on and eating on. Psalm 37:4 tells us, don't do that. Delight in the Lord. Don't worry about all these things. And I think that's the message of the entire chapter of Psalm 37. Throughout the psalm there, it talks about evil and what happens to evil people. It talks about the good, righteous people and what happens to them. It just tells us that it happens this way. I can really relate to verse 25. I've been young and now I'm old. Yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. So it tells us down there, the righteous are going to be okay. So don't worry about those things. Don't fret about them. Don't sit and continually go over them. Some of the things I'm talking about people fret over, of course, the COVID-19 virus. We hear so many different things from the beginning up to now. Wear your mask, don't wear a mask. Seems like every time we catch a news story, it is opposite of what maybe one we heard yesterday or the day before. So we don't know what to do. So people concentrate on that and on all the misinformation. And pretty soon, that's all they think about. That's what they're gnawing on all the time. COVID-19. Should I wear my mask? Should I not wear one? If you spend all your time thinking about those, you're not going to be focusing on God. You're not going to be delighting in God. The riots going on in this country right now. Terrible things going on. And people spend all their time thinking about, well, these people are doing this with immunity. They're not being punished. They're not being, the police are afraid to even arrest them because of what. So it's easy to see why you would think about those things, but don't let that occupy your mind. Don't let it spend all your time thinking about those things. One of the things that I've heard people discussing recently is how ridiculous it is, the idea that's being floated around, especially in political circuits right now, defunding the police departments. If it's this bad with the police departments trying to maintain order, what's it going to be like if we defund the police departments and we don't have them protecting us? It's another thing, but we can spend all of our time thinking about that and worrying about that, and it doesn't do any good. The Supreme Court decision this week saying that basically that a person's sex is whatever they want it to be. You can be born a man, but if you want to be a woman, you can be a woman. It's nothing new. We've seen this thing going on for time. We should be concerned and we should stand up for what's right, but don't spend all your time fretting over it, worrying about it. Abortion, what I consider one of the one or two worst things that people do to each other. A woman doing this to her child, and we need to stand up and let people know we're against it. But if we concentrate on that all the time, it's because we see it going on, and I'm going to show in a few minutes that it's not going to stop until Christ returns. Politics. I have friends in the church who have such strong political convictions that they won't fellowship with other people who have differing political views. It's sad. I saw this a few years ago. A friend of mine refused to go to a feast site because he knew this particular other person was going to be there, and all he's going to talk about is politics, because they have different political views. If he was talking about his political views, he wouldn't have minded it, but he wouldn't go because that person was going to be there. All these things are terrible in the world, and we can spend our time thinking about them and chewing on them, as the word fret indicates. And if we do, we're not going to have time to delight in the Lord. And that's what we're told to do to keep ourselves from fretting over these. Turn over to Romans chapter 1. I think Romans chapter 1 explains why all this is going on in the world, why there's so much evil. We'll start in verse 18 of Romans 1. And I think this clearly shows us why things are as bad as they are. And we should be concerned about it. I'm not saying don't be concerned about it, but don't waste your time. As fretting said, as we said there with fretting, it means it's useless, doesn't do any good, it only does harm. Don't let any of these things occupy all your time. In Romans chapter 1, verse 18, we read, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest to them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor worship, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and excuse me, and their foolish hearts were darkened." I think that so many people right now, if you observe them, especially in the world, their hearts are dark, and they've become that way. Professing to be wise, they become fools, and change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. God has given them up to this uncleanness. Don't be surprised that the majority of the people in the world are just vile, wicked, evil people. I know some people disagree with me. They say, oh, everybody's good. There's good people everywhere. I see a lot of evil and vile things in the world. Down in verse 28, I won't go through the next few verses, talk about how they change the natural use of the man, then they become men with men and women. We won't get into all that. Verse 28 says, "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting." That's why this world's in the shape it's in. Excuse me. They've rejected God as creator. They've rejected God, period. And he's given them over to a debased mind. If you don't think that most of these people have a very debased mind, look at some of the ideas, like I was talking about earlier. Defunding the police to bring peace. It doesn't make sense. They aren't logical at all. Paul was talking to Timothy over in 2 Timothy. Turn over to 2 Timothy chapter 3. He talked about some of this, talked about how bad people are. And he said something we need to remember. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, and we'll start in verse 1. 2 Timothy 3:1 says, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away." Turn away from them. Don't associate with them. Don't waste your time thinking constantly, gnawing over and over on it. Why are these people this way? It explains it to us there. The part that really gets me is verse 13. Drop down to verse 13 there. Paul said, "But evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse." You know, I thought 20 years ago this old world couldn't get any worse than it was then, but it has. This tells me it's going to keep getting worse and worse. Last weekend I viewed I think it was one of the older BT programs. I'm not sure exactly how old it was. Gary Petty was asked the question, are we living in the time of the end, or the end of the world? And he made the comment in there that people worry about the world ending, about man destroying himself. We could spend our lives thinking about that, and many people have. I've known people in the church that were consumed by keeping up with prophecy and thinking that it was just going to all end terrible. And we see all these movies about the end and how it's going to be afterwards. And it's kind of depressing if you gnaw on it all the time, if you spend all your time thinking about it. But Mr. Petty made the point in there, man's not going to be able to destroy the earth. And God is not going to destroy the earth. Jesus Christ is going to come back and save the world from destruction. When man gets to the point that he's at the point of destroying it, of ending it all, Christ is going to return and stop it. And he's going to establish his kingdom. So the end of the world is not something we should spend all of our time worrying about. Don't fret. Now there in verse 4, it says, delight yourself in the Lord. There's a lot in that word delight. I looked it up in Strong's. The word is anog. It says it's a primitive root, and the basic meaning of delight is to be soft or pliable. And when I read that, and I remember reading that definition years ago, but when I read that definition this week, it was an echo in my mind. I heard another voice. I heard other words. I don't know how many times I've heard Mr. DeCampos say, we've got to be humble and teachable. If that's not synonymous with those two words, soft and pliable, humble and teachable, it means the same thing. We've got to be soft and pliable in the potter's hands, where he can mold us into what he would have us to be. The word is translated delight there, and it says delight yourself. The word anog doesn't just mean delight, it means delight yourself. It's a reflexive pronoun used there, yourself, means it's up to you. You've got to do something. I have to do something. I have to choose to delight in God. I have to make a conscious effort to do it. And if I do that, I won't have time for fretting and worrying about what's going on in the world, what's happening. We're not to be blind, we're to keep up, we're to watch. But don't let that consume you. Don't let that, because it only leads to agitation and to worry. It only leads to bad things. Don't spend all your time fretting. Delight in God. Soft and pliable. I can't overemphasize, just like I said, what we hear so often, be humble and teachable. That's the key to not fretting, to not being consumed by all the bad things going on in the world and fretting over them. The same word is used again, anog there, is used over in Isaiah chapter 58. Turn to Isaiah chapter 58. It makes an interesting point here. Isaiah chapter 58, and we'll read verse 13. Isaiah 58, verse 13. A little word that we hear so often. If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. If you learn to keep the Sabbath the way I want it kept, that's what he said so far there in verse 13. Then verse 14, then you shall delight yourself, that Hebrew word anog, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Those are the things we need to focus on. Those are the things we need to chew on, not the bad things, the negative things that we see so much in the world. And it was interesting to me that the Sabbath was what was used here. Anog's only used less than 10 times, I think, in the whole Bible. And the two that we've looked at, talking about delighting in the Lord, it was interesting to me that the same word is used again when it starts talking about the Sabbath. If we keep the Sabbath correctly, as it says there, then we can delight in the Lord. The Sabbath was the first thing that I proved when I came into the church. It was one of the things that drew me there. But it's important. But the Sabbath is not the only thing. Another thing there about verse 13, which says, if you turn your foot from the Sabbath, we can't walk on God's Sabbath. The others are all talking about it being pleasure and delight and honorable and everything. Here it says, take your foot off of it. And every time I read that verse, I think of Moses at the burning bush. And God says, take your shoes off, Moses. This is holy ground. Our shoes, our feet represent what we do, where we go, the path that we've chosen. And if it's a holy path, if we want to live God's way, we'll really watch our feet, where we go, what we do. Of course, we'll watch our minds too, and what we allow our minds to be occupied with. But like I said a few minutes ago, it's not just the Sabbath. Turn over to Psalm 119. I think Psalm 119 is probably, I consider it a love song that David wrote about God's law, God's word. And over in verse 97, a verse that we turned into a hymn, it's in our hymnal, it's page 72, but let's look at Psalm 119, verse 97. Because it's not just the Sabbath. Oh, how I loved your law. It's my meditation all the day. I love your law, Father. I meditate on it. I chew on it. I don't chew on all the negative things and the bad things that are going in this world. I think about your law. I spend my time in your law. That's what we should be thinking about. Now, a lot of people, I can remember back in 94, 95, heard so many people as we were told, you don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to do that. You don't have to tithe. You don't have to keep the Sabbath. And I heard people talk about what a relief it was to be out from under this bondage, to be relieved from this. 1994, the Feast of Tabernacles in Vail, Colorado was our last feast with Worldwide. And I can remember the sermons, many of them were talking about the changes, about new things we were just learning and how we weren't under bondage to this and bondage to that. I can remember one sermon in particular that was really good. It was given by Mr. Roy Holliday, who was, most of you know, has been in United from the beginning. And he gave a real good sermon on loving God's law. It was the highlight of that feast. I've never had a bad feast. That was probably my least favorite feast, though, in 94, because I could see that the church rejecting God's law and God's word. And it was really sad. But a year later, in 1995, just after United had formed, I remember the first 2 years in United, we had a feast site right here in Lexington. We were the host city. We had a very small congregation, but it was a wonderful feast. People were rejoicing to be able to keep the feast again, to be able to observe God's word, to observe the Sabbath, the holy days, and to respect God's word again. And there was so much excitement and joy. I remember a sermon of Mr. Randy D'Alessandro. He's pastoring up in Chicago, Illinois right now, and Beloit, Wisconsin. But he made a statement in there, and it still resounds in my ears today. Every time I think about this subject, it makes me think about it. He was talking about all the things that people were saying were bondage and everything. And he was talking about how we were rejoicing at the feast, enjoying in God. And I remember he made the statement, if this is bondage, chain me to the wall. He wanted to be there. He wanted, if that's bondage, that's what I want. He was delighting in God's word and the joy of keeping the feast. And if we can't rejoice in that, then I think maybe we've gotten to the point where maybe our mind is becoming debased. We have to really be careful because we need to remember our calling. I talked about that a few weeks ago in a sermon, how wonderful our calling is. When I think about God's law and people calling it bondage or a burden, I think of Deuteronomy chapter 10. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 10. Moses is talking about the law that he's just given the people, or he didn't give it to them, God did, but he was the instrument through which it was given. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, we'll start in verse 12, just read a couple of verses here. This, when I think of it being bondage or considering bondage or a burden, it really flies in the face of what these two verses say. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command you today, for your good. God gave his law. He gave the Sabbath. He gave the holy days. It's all for our good. It's for life. That's what was talked about back there in chapter 37 of Psalm. The good things that happen to the righteous, to those who follow God. Of course, it talks about the bad things that happen to those others, and that's what it is. This is for our good. The other way is for our bad. So we shouldn't spend all of our time thinking about, and as I read, gnawing on the negative. Like I said, this isn't saying we shouldn't be aware of these things and we shouldn't think about them and know that they're wrong. Don't let them consume you, brethren. Turn over to Jeremiah. Jeremiah says something here. I heard these verses read a few years ago, and they've meant a lot to me ever since. It adds we talk about delighting in God. I talk about loving his law and rejoicing in it. In Jeremiah chapter 9, we'll start in verse 23. Another word comes in here, but it means basically the same thing as delighting, rejoicing. Verse 23 of Jeremiah 9 says, "Thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches." I looked up the word glory in the dictionary, Webster's, and it said to rejoice proudly. So he said, don't rejoice proudly about that. If you've got money, that's a good thing, but don't stake your life on that. Don't let that be the ruling thing in your life. If you're mighty man, or if you're wise, don't glory in those things. Don't rejoice proudly in them. Verse 24 says, "But let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, says the Lord." Now, the word delight there is a different word from onag. This doesn't mean to delight yourself. It means just delight. And God delights in these things: loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness. And we're to rejoice, we're to glory in the fact that we know and understand God. Oh, we don't understand everything. He hasn't revealed everything to us. But knowing God, knowing his plan, knowing the things he has revealed to us, that he's called us to live and to be his children, we should glory in these. That's what we need to spend our time thinking about, brother. That's what we need to glory in. It's a wonderful thing to know God and know his plan. And when I think of Psalm 37:4 in the aspect of getting our desires, there's some fine print here. There's a disclaimer. You know, any contract, a lot of the commercials you see on TV will have a fine print at the bottom. They'll throw a disclaimer in there. And I realized this about that verse many, many years ago. If you truly delight in the Lord, if you really love him, his law, his Sabbath, his holy days, your desires are going to change. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. We'll tell you what your desire is going to be if, as I said, you truly glory in the Lord, if you truly love him with all your heart, mind, and soul. It's a familiar verse. We really didn't have to turn here. Most of you can quote it, Matthew 6:33. "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Seek first the kingdom of God. Is that the thing that you think about most? You think about it when you wake up in the morning, last thing before you go to bed at night? We should be thinking about that. It's one of the things that God wants us to delight in and think about. And we won't have time for worry, for fretting over the other things if we do that. There's a comedy routine. I saw it many times on the old TV show Hee Haw. If any of you remember the old TV show Hee Haw, it was a skit that they did several times. And it was usually in Archie Campbell's barbershop. Somebody would come in and sit down, and Archie would say, start telling them a story. And he would talk about something bad that happened. "Well, I broke my foot today." "Oh, that's bad." And Roy would say, "No, that's good." And so, "What do you mean it's good?" "Well, I went to the hospital and there was this beautiful nurse taking care of me." "Oh, well, that's good." He said, "No, that's bad." He said, what do you mean that's bad? He said, well, my wife came in and caught that nurse kissing me. And he would go from good to bad, back and forth. Well, there's good and bad in our desires changing. Turn over to Luke chapter 12. If I told you, when I told you a few minutes ago, your desires changed if you truly delighted in the Lord, you might have said, well, that's good that your desires changed. Let's read it here in Luke 12, verse 31. I'm in Matthew. Started to read that and I knew that didn't match. Luke 12, verse 31. Luke 12:31 says, but seek the kingdom of God and all these things shall be added to you. Just like I said, your desires are going to change. You're going to say, that's good. And I'm going to say, no, that's bad. And the reason it's bad is because you're not going to get that Mercedes. You're not going to get that mansion that you wanted. And you might say, oh, that is bad. Let's read verse 32 because it's the key. Do not fear, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. You're not going to get the Mercedes and the mansion. You're going to get something so far above that, so worth so much more that those things can't even be compared. You're going to be in God's kingdom. You're going to be one of his children. We need to remember that. Now, we've talked about delighting in the Lord. We're talking about glorying in him and in his truth, rejoicing. Turn over to James. James chapter 1. James says something here that makes it kind of hard to understand sometimes, hard to get your mind around. But James chapter 1, we'll just read one verse, read verse 2 of James 1. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Count it all joy. All goes together, brethren. Excuse me. Delighting yourself in the Lord, rejoicing proudly in his truth, glorying in that. Count it all joy. No matter what happens in this world, no matter what we see, the trial, and I'm not minimizing anybody's trials and temptations because I know we have some terrible things that people are going through now. I have 3 friends who found out just recently who have cancer and who have dire diagnosis. 2 of them are on hospice, and the third one was told by his doctor that if he didn't have chemotherapy, he had 4 to 6 weeks to live. There's terrible things going on. I know that, and it's hard. I talked to my friend who got that diagnosis this week. He lives out in California, and I was struggling to come up with words to say to him, and he said, Ray, I've seen people healed. I know God can do it. He said, but if he chooses not to, that's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. He cheered me up saying that, knowing that because he saw this, he put this into action. He knows what God has in store for him, for the rest of us. The kingdom of God. He said if he dies, then he'll wake up in the kingdom. Count it all joy, regardless of what we're going through. Back in Psalm 37:4, it's not the key to getting what we want, brethren, despite what the health and wealth gospel tells us. That's not what the entire chapter is about. It's telling us how to stay sane in a world turned upside down. Focus on God, delight in him and his word, his truth, and be aware of what's going on in the world, but don't fret about it. Don't spend all your time chewing on what's going on, about the evil and the things that evil people are doing and getting away with seeing, because we know the end of the story. We know that their end is not good. We know that ours is. So, brethren, let's resolve not to fret about what we see going on around us, but to delight ourselves in the Lord.